Mark first noticed the street by sound. Cobblestones had their own voice. A soft clack under tyres, a hollow knock under heels, a faint rattle whenever a truck eased past the bookstore. Late evenings in Harbourside, those sounds thinned to almost nothing. Yet something still moved below his second-floor window, pacing a short, invisible line he could not quite map. The room above the shop held the tired smell of old paper and coffee grounds drifting up from the cafe. Mark slept on a narrow bed against the wall, boots lined up like they taught him years ago. Yet, each morning, one boot sat crooked, nudged just enough that he felt it in his chest like a question. He blamed his own restlessness, but the scuff marks on the floor said different. One night, rain fell in a steady whisper. The streetlight outside threw a soft cone of yellow onto the slick stones. Mark lay awake, listening. Beneath the rain he caught it again. A light click, then another, then a pause, as if weight shifted from side to side at the same spot near the black sedan that always parked by the corner. The sound slid up through the window frame and into his bones. He got up, padded barefoot to the glass, and eased 2 fingers under the blind. The sedan sat alone, beads of water gathering on its hood. No one in sight. Just the faint glow from the police station half a block away, and a scrap of wind pushing an empty cup along. Still, the sense of a presence lingered, like a breath that had not finished leaving the air. By morning, the rug beside the door of his room showed a shallow hollow, as if something had curled there for hours. A few short strands clung to the fabric, too coarse to be his own hair, too pale to match the dark doormat. He bent, pinched one between thumb and forefinger, and felt the way it resisted. Solid, real. The hair on his arms answered with a prickle. Twice that week, he heard a faint huff outside his door just before dawn, the kind of soft exhale that fogged metal. Once, the lower part of the door bore a faint smudge, as though a damp nose had pressed there and slid downward. Mark set his palm in the same place, feeling a residual warmth that his mind insisted could not still be there. He pulled his hand back, unsettled. He told himself it was the building settling, or a neighbour's late return, or echoes from the station. Years of training had left him wired to notice patterns, but they had also taught him to distrust shadows. Twice he decided he was imagining it all. Twice more the quiet click of passing weight on the stairwell made him sit upright in the dark, heart thumping. On Friday night, closing time left the bookstore dark and the cafe below cleaned down to stainless steel. Mark turned off his lamp and lay still. The city exhaled into its usual hush. Then, once more, came that unhurried pacing on the cobblestones, back and forth near the sedan, back and forth by the corner. Something was still on watch out there, and, against his better judgment, he realized he was waiting for it, too. The first time he saw her, she stepped into the streets, framed like a familiar scene he had never watched from this angle. Midnight blue uniform, shoulders set, hair pulled into a knot that had given up being neat hours before. She walked the line of parked cars with a steady pace, something invisible moving just ahead of her, drawing her toward the corner where the sedan waited. The shape that trotted beside her was easy to miss at first. A low silhouette, sturdy and purposeful, slipping in and out of the streetlight. Mark caught the flash of movement, the tilt of a head as it checked the shadows between bumpers. For a heartbeat, he thought of patrols in another country, another road, long ago. Then the moment passed, swallowed by the gentle noise of the town. He leaned his forearms on the window frame, feeling the cool paint under his skin. The pair reached the sedan. The shape sat, perfectly still, chest rising slow, eyes fixed on the license plate. The officer spoke, voice too soft to carry, and a faint jingle answered her, metal against metal, as if a clip or tag shook with each breath. Mark felt the back of his neck tighten. Every night that week, the pattern repeated. Same time, same route, same pause beside the black sedan, if it was there. When another car took the spot, the pair still slowed at that patch of cobblestone, scanning the gutter, checking the curb. The shape would lower its head, sniff, then look up toward the station as though waiting for permission it never quite received. At the coffee shop the next morning, Mark asked the woman at the counter who worked late at the station. She smiled and tapped the window with a towel. "That'll be Officer Shaw," she said. "And Rook. They've been together a long time." She went on about fundraisers and school talks, but his mind caught on the name that clearly belonged to the four-legged shadow. That evening, Mark waited on the sidewalk instead of at his window. The stones held the day's leftover warmth under his boots. When the pair turned the corner, Rook's ears flicked toward him before the rest of the body followed. The officer gave Mark a nod, a small town. "This is your third week here," kind of greeting, then gently redirected her partner back to the route. "Eyes front," she murmured. "Work first, making friends later." Rook obeyed, but not without one backward glance at Mark. A quick measure that felt more thorough than any handshake. The animal's gaze slid past him to the sedan, lingering on the scuffed bumper, the slightly bent plate. Something in that stare held a weight beyond habit, a memory folded into muscle and bone. Mark felt a question rise in him. What had happened at this precise spot? He lay awake longer than usual that night, listening for the late patrol, When it came, the rhythm was the same, yet now each pause hummed with new meaning. The clicks on the stone, the soft scrape near his door at dawn, the hollow on the rug, all of it lined up in his mind like points on a map. He could not shake the sense that Rook was tracing an old wound in the street, and that he himself had stepped into the edge of it without knowing why. A week later, rain drove the evening crowds inside, and the cafe was fuller than usual. Mark sat near the window, nursing coffee that had cooled, watching drops race each other down the glass. The station's front door opened, spilling a brief wash of yellow light. Officer Shaw entered the shop in uniform, cap tucked under one arm, Rook at her heel, fur damp enough to darken the floor where he sat. Up close, she looked younger than he had expected, maybe late 30s. Early lines at the corners of her eyes, carved more by long shifts than by age. Rook settled under her chair, nails clicking once on the tile before going still. When the barista waved Mark over to their table, introduction felt less like small talk and more like acknowledging people who had been sharing a street for weeks. Mark Weaver, he said, offering a hand, just passing through. Her grip was firm, the kind that never quite left the job at the door. Elena Shaw, she replied. Harbourside PD. This one's Rook. He thinks the whole block is his business. At his name, Rook looked up, ears twitching toward Mark's voice. Eyes a calm, steady brown that seemed older than the rest of him. Their stories came out in pieces. Mark did not list the places had been, only saying he used to wear a different uniform and was getting used to not sleeping in sand or steel. Elena did not describe every call she had answered, but she mentioned a stretch of years when the city felt meaner, when sirens cut the nights into sharp little fragments. Rook, she said, had been beside her for most of it. There was an accident on that corner, she added, nodding toward the cobblestones outside. 3 winters back. Black car. Bad weather. Too much speed. Rook got me out of the way. Her hand dropped under the table, fingers weaving absently into the thick fur at his neck. Has never quite forgiven that patch of road. Rook's gaze shifted, following the line of her chin toward the sedan's usual spot. Mark understood more than he said. He knew what it meant to have one square of earth carry a whole chapter of memory. How a single alley or gate in a foreign city could live forever in the body. He watched the way Rook's chest rose and fell faster when someone parallel parked too close to the corner. The animal's front paws crept forward a fraction, as if ready to move before thought caught up. They want to retire him, Elena said quietly, once the shop had thinned out. Policy, age, budget. They have nice words for it. Rook's muzzle showed the faintest frosting around the edges, but his eyes tracked every movement outside with undiminished focus. They say he'll get a newer partner. I can imagine handing his leash to someone else and just going home. Mark stared into his coffee, seeing instead a ramp on a military airfield. The moment someone had taken gear from his hands and told him he had done enough. He remembered smiling for their sake, then walking away with fingers that did not know where to rest. They don't teach us what to do with our hands afterward, he said. Elena gave a half laugh at that. Soft and brittle. Under the table, Rook shifted closer to her boots, as if anchoring them both. When they finally stood to leave, the rain had let up, leaving the stones wet and shining. Outside, Rook paused at the corner, as he always did, nose lifted, scanning the crosswalk and curb with intensity. Elena followed his gaze, then met Mark's eyes briefly. He remembers, she said, and he doesn't trust the ones who still drive like they never will. The air between them held the weight of things neither of them was quite ready to set down. Spring crept in slowly, trading the sharp wind for a gentler chill that smelled of salt and distant grass. Mark found himself timing his errands to match Elena's patrol breaks, learning the rhythm of the station door and the way Rook's tail thumped once against the frame when he saw him. The animal's welcome was never noisy, just a deliberate step forward, as if granting a small promotion from stranger to tolerated company. One afternoon, traffic thickened near the corner, horns peppering the air as tourists searched for parking. Mark stood outside the bookstore, hands in the pockets of his worn camo jacket, watching cars nose in and out. The black sedan appeared, familiar scuffs catching the light. Its young driver, patterned shirt half tucked, swung into the spot with more speed than sense, tires kissing the curb hard enough to make the nearby trash can tremble. Rook stiffened the moment the engine cut. He leaned his weight subtly against Elena's leg, then stepped in front of her, planting himself between her and the car. His gaze locked onto the dented plate, breathing quick and shallow. Elena tried to move around him. He countered each shift with a block, never touching with force, just enough to redirect. The memory in his muscles had sharpened into warning. Easy, partner, she murmured, resting a hand on his back. To Mark, she added. He does this whenever that one shows up. We've ticketed him twice. Thinks the road's a video game. The young man hopped out, boots scuffed, phone already in his hand. He glanced at Rook with a smirk that didn't bother to reach his eyes, then sauntered toward the bars down the block. Later, as dusk smeared the sky in pink and grey, a delivery van backed along the street, driver craning to see. The van's beeping blended with music from a nearby open window. Mark saw the moment the driver misjudged the distance to the sedan. Before anyone could shout, Rook lunged, not toward the vehicle but across Eleanor's path, shoulders slamming into her legs just enough to throw her off balance and back toward the sidewalk. The van's bumper scraped the sedan with a grinding squeal. Metal kissing metal where she had stood a heartbeat earlier. Mark felt a flash of that old deployment surge adrenaline in a clean line from spine to fingertips. Elena caught herself on the lamppost, eyes wide, then looked down at Rook, who now sat firmly in the space he had claimed, eyes locked on the vehicles as if daring them to move again. That's twice he's pulled me out of the way of someone else's bad choices, she said later, voice lighter to hide the tremor. Her hand stayed on Rook's shoulder longer than usual. He doesn't forget. Not accidents. Not people. Mark nodded, seeing the invisible ledger Rook kept. Makes of cars, faces, patterns in how boots hit the pedals. Animals, he thought, sometimes carried intelligence where humans carried excuses. The next day, Mark brought Rook a new rubber ball, dark blue like the uniform. He did not toss it. He simply rolled it across the station floor. Rook watched, then nudged it back, choosing the angle carefully so it stopped just shy of Mark's foot. It felt less like play and more like a quiet test. When Mark bent to pick it up, Rook's nose brushed his wrist, a brief touch that felt like permission. From then on, Rook's nightly pacing included a glance up at Mark's window. Sometimes the animal would pause on the street, head tipped back, ears forward, as if checking that the quiet man above the bookstore was still in his assigned spot. Mark found himself saluting the silhouette with 2 fingers before turning off his lamp. The town had given him no official duty, but Rook had, and that mattered more. By early summer, the talk around town had settled into a steady murmur about budgets and cuts. The council wanted numbers reduced, programs trimmed, and Rook's name showed up on a list that made Elena's jaw tighten. They say he's done his part, she told Mark on a bench near the harbour. Rook lay at her feet, ears rotating between gulls and passing engines, as if listening for threats neither of them could see. A community festival was planned for the end of the month, banners already strung along the street by the bookstore. The cobblestones would host food stalls, music, children darting between tables. Mark imagined strollers and folding chairs clogging the very spot Rook hated, and his chest tightened. Crowds made patterns messy. They gave careless drivers more chances to be careless. He had seen that equation play out too often in other places. On the afternoon before the festival, the black sedan appeared again, slipping into its usual spot with practiced entitlement. The young driver climbed out, patterned shirt brighter in the long light, boots leaving dusty prints on the stones. He knocked Rook's rubber ball aside with his foot as he cut across the sidewalk, offering Elena a lazy mock salute. Afternoon. Officer. Ready for the big parade of hot dogs and old folks. Rook moved between them before she could answer. Stance low. Muscles tight but controlled. His eyes tracked the man's boots, not his hands or face, as though those scuffed tan soles were the real source of danger. The driver paused, irritation flashing. "Cool your mutt off," he said, voice pitched louder now that people were watching. Elena's shoulders squared, but her reply stayed calm. "Hes working. You can walk around him." The festival day dawned bright, sunlight spilling over the harbour and pooling on the cobblestones. Booths went up along the block, the smell of grilled food and popcorn mixing with exhaust and ocean air. Elena worked crowd duty with Rook at her side, weaving between neighbours and tourists. Mark helped at the cafe tent, eyes never drifting far from the corner where the sedan tended to land like an unwelcome habit. By mid-afternoon, music from a local band bounced off brick facades. Children danced near the curb, their sneakers skidding dangerously close to the street. Rook's head stayed in constant motion, cataloguing every sudden movement. When a balloon popped nearby, he flinched, then quickly recovered, leaning into Elena's leg to ground himself. She murmured gratitude, fingers brushing his fur, but Mark saw the strain in both of them. The sedan arrived late, engine revving through the song's bridge. It pushed slowly into a gap too small, forcing another car to jerk forward. A paper plate flew from someone's hand, landing under a tire. The driver laughed. Window down, music thumping deep bass into the stones. Rook froze, gaze locking on the vehicle like a compass, snapping north. His tail lowered, body shifting subtly in front of Elena without waiting for instruction. Mark left the coffee tent without quite deciding to, feet carrying him toward the storefronts. He moved along the building line, staying out of the main flow of people, watching. The driver stepped out, boots landing in the small space between car and curb with a careless hop. He spotted Elena and Rook and grinned wide, as if they were part of the entertainment. "There they are," he called. "Street decorations." Several men in dark suits from the council table approached, their badges flashing in the sunlight. They greeted Elena with practiced politeness, shaking hands, thanking her for all her years of service with the unit, language that made Mark's stomach twist. A brochure corner stuck out of one man's pocket with a photo of a newer, younger canine team on it. Rook's ears flattened more at that paper than at the crowd's noise Tension knotted the air as neatly as the bunting overhead. Elena stood straight, smiling for the council members, while Rook's nails made tiny dents in the dirt between stones. Ready and waiting. Mark could feel decision closing in from all sides. Officials wanting a clean retirement. A driver who treated laws like suggestions. A partner who would not step away from the corner that had once almost taken her. And somewhere under it all, the street remembered, too. When the speeches began at a portable podium near the sedan, Mark took up a position by the doorway of the bookstore. He could see the whole tableau. The black car, the officer in uniform, Rook sitting but wound tight, the young man lounging with exaggerated boredom, the men in suits aligning themselves for photographs. He had learned long ago that trouble liked such arrangements, noise, distraction, and one person convinced nothing bad could happen in a familiar place. The sun slid lower, throwing longer shadows across the cobblestones, including one that stretched from the sedan's rear bumper right up to Rook's paws. The animal's gaze traced that dark line over and over, as if seeing not just the present moment but an overlay of the night years earlier. Mark felt the world narrow to that patch of street. Whatever was coming, it would start there. The councilman at the microphone raised his voice over the hum of the festival. He spoke of progress and upgrades, of modern assets and strategic deployment of resources. When he mentioned transitioning our beloved Rook into a well-earned rest, polite applause followed. Elena's hand tightened on the leash. Beside her, Rook shifted, weight sliding forward just enough that Mark noticed. Pupils dark and wide. The young driver rolled his eyes theatrically, then pushed off the sedan with one shoulder. Yeah. Retire the four-legged fossil, he muttered, loud enough for nearby teens to hear. They snickered. Rook's ears flicked back, catching the tone if not the words. The animal rose. Stance square. Gaze glued to the man's boots as he stepped closer. Swagger telegraphing every ounce of his disregard for the badge on Elena's chest. Sir, stay behind the line, Elena said, nodding toward a strip of yellow tape set more for show than for real crowd control. Her voice stayed measured, but the strain edged it. The driver smirked, deliberately planting one boot halfway over the tape. What? You afraid your old partner's gonna trip? He said. He looks like one little tap would put him out of his misery. His eyes gleamed with the thrill of an audience. Before anyone could react, he lifted his leg, drawing his boot back toward Rook's ribs in a lazy, almost playful arc that made Mark's vision narrow. It was not a full, committed strike yet, but it was intention drawn like a line in the air. Rook did not flinch. Instead, he leaned into Elena, body between her and the car. accepting the angle of threat as if that was his job. For the second time that day, Mark was already moving. 2 councilmen grabbed Elena's arms, trying to pull her back, fearing a public scene. Their suits strained as she fought the instinct to step forward. The motion only half checked her. Her radio slipped from her belt, clattering onto the cobblestones. A small burst of static bleeding into the music. Nearby, a license plate that had been propped for a display stand clanged loose, skittering to a stop near Rook's paws. Mark covered the distance from the doorway to the sedan in a handful of strides. Years of training, supposedly put behind him, woke in his muscles without asking. He cut in from the side, boots gripping the uneven stones. The driver's leg reached the top of its lazy swing. In that split second, Mark saw it all, the boot. The rib's head seen rise and fall under his own hand. The officer's wide eyes. The crowd's phones halfway up. He drove his shoulder into the young man's hip, redirecting the arc, not breaking, but bending it. The boot sailed past Rook's side, catching only air before slamming against the sedan's door with a hollow thunk. Momentum took them into the car, Mark absorbing the impact with his own back. The driver yelped in surprise more than pain, arms flailing for balance. They both ended up against the hood, metal warm under their palms. Rook exploded into motion, not with teeth but with placement. He stepped in front of Elena, pressing her back from the scuffle, body a shield between her and any wild swing. His gaze never left the driver's legs. Every subtle shift of weight, every twitch of a boot, he tracked and answered with a micro-adjustment in stance. Anyone looking for aggression would see none. Anyone looking for protection would see nothing else. The crowd's noise rose, a swell of gasps and half-started shouts. Phones pointed, recording. Elena wrenched free of the councilman, stepping to Mark's side. "That's enough," she said, voice carrying the command of a dozen long nights. She took hold of the driver's wrist, guiding it behind his back with practiced efficiency. Mark stepped away, breathing hard, letting the moment settle. He felt the old tremor in his hands and forced them still. "What's your problem?" "Man." The driver spat, more shaken than hurt. "It's just a dog." The words hung in the air, ugly and small. Mark looked at Rook, chest rising steady now, eyes locked onto the speaker with a depth that made the insult feel absurd. "No," Mark said quietly, each syllable measured. "Hez the reason she's standing where she is. And you just tried to take a cheap shot at both of them." Later, after statements were taken and tempers cooled under the weight of replayed footage, Mark sat on the station steps with Elena and Rook. The license plate that had clattered free now rested on the step beside them, edges scraped. Elena nudged it with her boot. "That first accident," she said. "The one he never forgot. The car lost its plate when it hit. It landed right where he keeps staring. Rook's paw lay over the metal now, as if pinning the memory in place." Mark ran a hand over Rook's back, feeling scar lines hidden in the thick fur. "Has been watching for that pattern ever since." Mark said, "Same kind of car. Same kind of boots behind the wheel. Same piece of street. You weren't just in his way today. You were exactly where you were 3 winters ago." Elena swallowed, eyes glistening. She bent to rest her forehead briefly against Rook's. "You didn't just save me once," she whispered. "You've been saving me every night you wouldn't stop watching." Word of the incident travelled through town faster than any official memo. By the next week, the conversation at the cafe tables had shifted. People replayed the footage on their phones, not to gawk at a scuffle, but to point out the way Rook moved a living buffer between harm and the ones he cared about. The phrase, "just a dog," didn't sit well in Harbourside anymore. It landed and died in the air before anyone could agree. At the council meeting that followed, Mark sat in the back, Rook at his feet with special permission. Elena stood at the front, shoulders squared, speaking not just as an officer, but as someone who owed her life to the partner at her side. She played the clips that showed Rook's pattern. The way he blocked, the way he watched the corner, the way his body predicted danger before human eyes caught up, retiring him to a couch. She said, "Wouldn't be mercy. It would be confusion." The compromise surprised her. Rook would scale back from full patrols but stay on as a community liaison, working festivals, school visits, and specific street watches where his instincts still sang. A younger unit would take primary calls, but his rank, in the quiet vocabulary Elena used with him, would remain. She left the meeting with relief, sitting light and unfamiliar in her chest. Rook trotted beside her, sensing the shift in her stride. Their new rhythm formed gently. Mornings began with slower walks along the harbour, Mark joining more often than not. They took the long way to the station, letting Rook sniff the edges of benches and bollards, revisiting the corner but without the same tight focus. He would pause, check the traffic with a quick glance, then look back at them as if to ask, "All right? Do you see it now?" 2. Afternoons found them at the elementary school, where Rook demonstrated how to sit, stay, and ignore dropped food with heroic self-control. Children's hands patted his back, their giggles filling the gym. Mark watched from the doorway, feeling something unclench inside. The same discipline that had once scanned rooftops for snipers now helped second graders learn about crossing streets safely. Purpose, he thought, did not always require danger. Sometimes it required presence. In the evenings, the trio often returned to the bookstore's steps with takeout containers. Rook lay with his front paws resting on the top cobblestone, just shy of the spot where the sedan used to park. Whenever a car pulled up too quickly, his head lifted, ears sharp. But if the driver adjusted, slowing, giving wide berth to the crosswalk, Rook settled again, satisfied. It was as if he had decided to share the watch with the whole town. Mark noticed that his own sleep had changed. The sounds of the cobblestones no longer sounded like approaching threats. Instead, they were cues in a familiar lullaby. Helena's boots heading home, Rook's lighter steps, the soft clack of a careful driver braking in time. On bad nights, when old memories tugged him awake, he only had to look out and find the pair on their route. Knowing Rook was still on duty, in his own way, steadied him. One late afternoon, as the sun poured liquid gold over the brick facades, Mark closed the bookstore early and joined Elena and Rook for a walk without any pretense of errands. They moved through the town together past the station, past the harbour, over the cobblestones that now held both danger remembered and safety reclaimed. It felt, he realised, like a patrol he had chosen, not one he had been ordered into. Autumn returned with a softness that suited harbourside. Leaves collected in the gutters, adding a muted rustle to the familiar sounds of tyres and footsteps. Rook's muzzle had gathered more silver, but his eyes remained clear, tracking each passing shape with that same steady intelligence. If his steps were slower, no one mentioned it. They simply matched his pace, letting the town move around them. The black sedan stopped appearing. After the charges and the public scrutiny, the driver had chosen a different street or a different town. No one seemed to miss him. Yet the corner he used to claim did not go empty. Children waited there for crossing help now, trusting Rook's presence as much as the painted lines. He would stand at the curb, glance left and right, then walk them over as if leading a small, dignified parade. Inside the station, the loose license plate that had skittered across the cobblestones now hung on the wall above Rook's bed. Elena had cleaned it, but she left the scratches. A small plaque beneath read simply, "For the one who never stopped watching." Officers passing by would sometimes rest their fingers lightly on the metal. A quiet acknowledgement of the partner who had turned one moment of terror into years of careful vigilance. Mark found his stay in harbourside stretching from weeks into months, then into something without an end date. He helped more at the bookstore, fixed creaky steps, and took late-night walks when the air turned cold enough to show their breath. Beside him, Elena talked about cases and neighbours, about the strange ache of knowing one day Rook really would need more rest than work. Rook padded along, occasionally bumping his head against Mark's hand as if reminding him to stay present. On the first snowy evening of the season, the three of them stood once more at the corner by the old sedan spot. Streetlights haloed the falling flakes, laying a clean sheet over the stones. Rook sat between them, gaze sweeping the quiet road. Then up at their faces, Mark slid a hand into Elena's, feeling the worn edge of her duty and the warmth beneath it. "I'm glad I was there that day," he said. She nodded, eyes shining. "So am I." But he was there every day before that. Rook sighed, leaning into both of them. And for a long moment, the corner felt less like a place of danger remembered and more like a front porch they all shared solid, steady, and finally, unmistakably home. If this story touched your heart, drop a simple 1 in the comments to let us know you were here. Your support keeps these gentle stories alive. Don't forget to subscribe and stay with us, because the next story might just be the one that finds you when you least expect it.